didn't is, what does secular therapy, these, Christians that watch this may be interested in your answer to this. What does secular therapy do with the concept of demonic possession? And do you think this is right or wrong?
I think more often than not, because secular therapy does not take Christianity and the miraculous seriously. It's an add-on. If it helps the client, then we'll talk about it. I think they don't take it seriously. So I think, and it just so happens, like it's a happy coincidence that they are taking the correct approach. The intention behind it is not appropriate, but what they do is go, this is not demonic possession. You are freaking crazy. Let us do some testing and I will prove to you that you are crazy. And of course they don't say it like that. They're much kinder than what I just did. But
Right.
They kind of like how when Hamill was getting all of those tests to get to the end of the line to autism, which we felt like from the beginning he had, and they were saying, well, it's a process of elimination.
Right.
It is sort of within that same vein. If somebody comes in and says, I think I am demonically possessed, they go, oh, okay, they're there. We're going to make a list of all the things. Like, you tell me why you think you're demonically possessed, and as you describe what's going on with you, I'm going to write down what I think is actually wrong with you. And then you
That's patronizing.
And you work from that list. Well, it's
Because they have a faulty worldview.
It's a combination of patronizing and due diligence.
Right. Yeah, there's this. There we go. Yeah, it's patronizing because, to me, because are they probably demonically possessed? Probably not. But you preclude the possibility. You preclude the opportunity that is true because you have a materialistic worldview, because you think things like that don't exist. This is one of these built-in sort of limitations to the general social science, as you said earlier, as we both said earlier. It's a problem, and this is why I included the question. It's a problem because there are people that are afflicted with all kinds of maladies that you won't find in that book, and it's not just possession, right? There are other things and stuff that gives you the heebie-jeebies that we won't talk about, but it's just I just think it's one of those glaring weaknesses or inconsistencies within the worldview that most therapists have. Obviously, you don't. But what do you do? What do you do when you're confronted with information that is so odd or supernatural? Well, here's an example. So, you're a therapist. Doesn't matter what kind or where. You're a therapist, and you go, okay. Send the client on in, and I'm thinking of Lucifer, and you've got somebody that's able to come in and claims to be demonically possessed. Maybe they don't claim to be demonically possessed, and you're a materialistic, you're not a dualist. You're a materialistic sort of, the brain is the mind and the mind is the brain, and then they proceed to tell you everything you did last night. They don't know you. They've never met you. You're not even sure of their name until you see it on the paperwork. They tell you everything you did last night. They can tell you what clothes you were wearing, tell you the name of the people you were with. They can tell you their age. They can tell you all kind of details about, well, for that matter, the last 7 evenings you've had. They can tell you where you live, your address. They can tell you all kind of information. What do you do? Now, you've not been confronted with something like this, and I hope you never are. But what do you do when your worldview breaks down from a psychological perspective? Of do you just rationalize that away when they literally walk up the wall or crawl up the wall? Like, what do you say? Well, maybe maybe I'm hallucinating. Like, what do you? And I'm being crass, but it's like it is a problem if you're in that situation. That's a real problem, not just for the person who is possessed. And granted, most pastors, most clergy, even exorcists will tell you that, it's some 1 out of 1,000 or less that they're exorcists and they get people referred to them. So I'm not saying that this is common or normal or you'll ever see that, but when your worldview collides with reality in a way that is incompatible, what do you do? I just always get concerned about. It's all fine and dandy when you work within the parameters of what your worldview can accept, but what about when it can't accept that? What about when you have an experience that is absolutely counterintuitive to what you believe? You have no way of classifying it because you don't have space for that within your worldview.
So I think as someone who would naturally cling to logic, and I would think, oh, okay, if you're telling me, you know what I have done the last 7 nights, the most logical thing to think would be, are you stalking me? Are you what's going on? If you hear hoofbeats think
The Jersey
horses,
Devil.
not zebras. No. And
Yeah.
and also people have this misconception about therapy that they go in and tell the therapist their problem, and the therapist runs it into their little mental machine and spits out a solution. Go home and fix it in this manner. And that's not what happens. So if a person walked in and said that, and I would be thinking, oh, okay, very logically, practically speaking, good chance they might have been following me, stalking me, whatever. But you also, the conversation is based mostly on the client.
Yeah.
What the questions that are most frequently asked are, what are you trying to get out of this? What is your goal?
Right.
And so that would be kind of the point I would reach. I would say, oh, okay, what is your purpose in sharing that with me? What are you trying to attain?
Here's a question. I guess the last question I have on this would be this. You talked about how, pastors should be willing to say, and I agree with you, way back at the beginning of this conversation, you said pastors should be willing to say, hey, I can do what I can as far as my training here in the office and encourage you, pray with you, share scriptures with you, even talk about how you can apply those scriptures, whatever, be there for you, we can go have lunch, whatever, we can keep talking, but here's a good counselor in our church that you should. Is there a backward referral process? Does that happen? Do you guys ever have you ever been trained on that, or is there hey, we should refer you to the church? We should, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. That is why I was saying that at that point a good counselor should sort of pitch it back to that person, what is your goal? What are you trying to accomplish here? Because if that person thinks that they are demon possessed or has something spiritually going on with them, why did you come here to counseling and not to a priest?
They walk up the wall and you go, well, hey, Peter Parker, he's real, obviously, Spider-Man.
No, but once again, we talked about the different kind of levels of expectation and kind of things that we're held to. I mean, I don't know what on earth would happen if I saw somebody crawl up the wall. I would desperately want to record them and tell somebody,
But you couldn't, right?
but I do not think I could. Therefore, I would
think
play
it's not
it
legal.
safe
Like
and would not.
that's a violation, right?
Yeah, and because of confidentiality, if they don't think you're demon possessed, and
I'm
they don't,
fine.
and they
Walking
don't
up
give
the wall,
me,
I'm good.
and they don't give me permission,
Yeah.
unless they are breaking, unless they're taking some of those boxes of confidentiality of harm to self, others, someone harming them, or they give me permission.
Yeah.
Like I do not like if they're not out to hurt me or themselves, I can't call anyone else. And if they do not give me permission to go tell a priest or
Yeah.
to tell a pastor, it's the job of counseling, is not to provide them solutions. We're not.
Yeah.
We're leading the horse to water. We are not making them drink.
Right.
Like we are asking guiding questions. So I might say, do you believe you're demonically possessed? Oh, you do? Have you considered
Yeah.
reaching out to a religious
And so you don't have anything in the DSM-5 TR that is. I know that there's not a category for demon possession in DSM-5 TR. I get that. But like lycanthropy,
No.
okay? I mean that's a mental illness where people believe they're werewolves. Been documented for centuries. It's a real condition. Right? I'm not trying to be funny. It's a real condition. I just didn't know if that was in there or we know we've talked about this. I don't know what the new name is, but multiple personality disorder.
D.I.D.
Yeah, right. That's right. So that
Dissociative
is
identity disorder.
in your book, right?
And either that or schizophrenia would be at the top of the list when someone
To
would
rule
go,
out.
Oh, you're demon possessed. Let me write down what I think is.
And we've
actually
talked
wrong
about
with
this
you.
before, but I don't really remember what you said. It may not have been definitive because you may not have a definitive answer. But D.I.D. I should have used that to begin with, I guess, just because it's in your book. But and obviously possession is not. How do you interact with that? How do you engage with that? That's fairly indiscernible from demon possession.
Well, it is so rarely
I remember you
diagnosed
saying that, yeah.
that the likelihood that I will personally ever run into it or that someone I know who practices will run into it unless they, are very skilled or specialized in it.
Yeah.
We will probably never encounter it. I mean, there may be people who come in and think, oh, I totally got it, but they just don't know enough about mental health to more accurately pinpoint it. I will say that some of the more famous cases that have launched books and studies and things like that. Like there was a little girl who said that she had multiple personality disorder. And I think there was one other famous case that involved a woman and the mental health professionals. They, I think, wrote books and they recorded the sessions and they went on to become very famous and like went on talk shows and and they kind of set the bar for further practice and investigation. Both individuals came back later and reneged. And it wasn't actually multiple personality or now what we call dissociative identity. It was more like persuasive leading.
Gotcha.
So it wasn't some of those big cases that people will bring up. It it was later found to not even be true.
So are there documented cases at all of
There,
they're in the literature? Or?
I mean, there are, but I mean, depend, like if you talk to a religious person, they would say, oh, well, they definitely, I mean, it is actually one of those things that it really depends on who you ask, because a religious person would make the argument for possession. If you speak to a trauma specialist, they would, the reason they made the shift from multiple personality to dissociative identity is because they will say that more often than not it is a trauma response, like it's rooted in trauma. And so they dissociate to such a degree that they build a whole new persona to kind of protect their mind from the trauma they experienced. And that is what...
Sounds like bull. I'll finish the sentence for you.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those things I'm glad that I will probably never run into it. And if I ever did run into it, I would pass it off to someone way more knowledgeable than I. Because I have such a hard time believing something like I saw the movie Split.
Yeah,
It
was
so fascinating. It wasn't me, it was Patricia.
Yeah, we laughed at that stuff, you know.
Yeah, but if I saw that in person, it would be so truly terrifying, because I mean
The beast.
it is natural for people to dissociate because of trauma, but to the point that like you write with a different hand and you have different handwriting and
Voice and
like
gender and
it is something that I'm just glad that I can only have to sit here and like personally think about, you know, hypothetically.
But to clear it up as we go to number 8, you do believe in demonic possession. Is that, you know, as a Christian, like, do you believe that's a real thing, or do you think all of those cases can be explained away as psychological trauma, mental illness? Like, do you have you ever personally witnessed somebody that you believe was demonically possessed? Let me start with that. If you say yes, then you obviously believe in that. But have you ever personally, in retrospect?
I have never personally. I have, the closest I have gotten is I have heard from people that I don't think are absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
That they have encountered someone who did some scary enough stuff, could tell them enough about them that they, you know, kind of took a step back and kind of got freaked out by. But do I think it's possible? Yes. Because if I believe that it is still possible for miracles to happen in such a
Which you do.
positive extreme, yes, I do, in such a positive extreme manner, then it only makes sense that there is an equal yet opposite possibility.
But you don't have evidence to that. Like, that's...
No.
I'm not trying to grill you. I'm not trying to throw you softballs and just, you know, Kamala Harris you through this. Like, you know, you don't have evidence, personal evidence. You haven't seen that. You've read the Bible. You've seen that almost every page Jesus is driving demons out of people left and right throughout the Gospels.
Do I think it has ever existed? Absolutely.
But do you think it still happens? I mean, because, like, you know, you would argue, like, the miracles in the ways that they were taking place with the apostles in Acts are not in effect today, that God is dealing differently in the age in which we live to some extent. But but you don't rule it out altogether just because you've not seen
Correct.
There's
Do
tons
I-
of things. I've never seen the continent of Australia, but I know it's. Well, I'll use Kamala's words. So what? I've never been to the border. Never been lots of places. I mean, just because I've never been there doesn't mean that it's not real. I still believe that. I believe heaven's real. I've never been there.
Well, and I know that there are places where it is more, it claims to be more commonly occurring, and I think that is twofold. I think that in like places like Africa
Yeah.
and in India and in places that are so heavily paganistic
Yeah.
and even devil worshiping. Like there
Real
are
devil
things. Yes,
Not, not
there are
edgy
things-
teenagers who like to wear black.
Yes, not emo.
Right.
But like animal sacrificing
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
but they things like that, because they are more commonly occurring, they are opening themselves up to more dark and depraved things like the potential for demon possession.
Yeah.
Whereas most Americans are just playing Satanists
Yeah.
because their mom hurt their feelings. But I
Because
also
they're anarchists.
right. But I also know that they do not have the level of education and understanding and like opportunity to seek answers.
Yeah.
So I do think it's more likely that it's happening in places like that, but they also could have their mentally ill children chained to a tree because they think they're demon possessed.
That happens all the time.
Yeah. And so I think that is such a muddy kind of question to wade into. Because I mean anything is possible. That is a power more powerful than I could ever imagine. I'm not going to rule it out just because I haven't seen it, but I would take a very like guarded
Yeah.
evaluation of elimination.
That's what I was going to ask you next is like, has your training and you're a very rational person. So has your training and your rationality and your like, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras, approach to mental health sort of tamped down, not that you don't believe in those things, but tamped down the expectation of the, like you are, well, I mean, this is, these people have gotten to know you pretty well throughout the course of this episode as far as your views on a lot of this stuff. And I'm sure if they watch this channel, they know my views on stuff. It's all the Nephilim series or whatever, but you're much more hesitant to grant the evil supernatural in part because of your lack of experiences of those things, and good for you, by the way. But you're much more reticent to say, well, I think it happens, but that's probably definitely not what that is. You don't know what you don't know on some of that, right? And